Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022. Deployment of 5G wireless around some U.S. airports delayed in response to concerns the technology could jeopardize airplane safety, and airlines and pilots warning of the economic consequences of having to ground cargo and passenger planes. U.S. Senate formally starting debate on voting rights bills, with Majority Leader Chuck Schumer promising a vote this week on trying to change the Senate filibuster rule, win, lose, or draw. Federal website to order free at-home COVID testing kits has a soft launch one day before its official rollout. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken traveling to Ukraine. We'll get the latest on U.S.-Russian tensions over Russia's military buildup on the Ukrainian border and Russia's demands of NATO force pullback. From U.S. senators who traveled to Kyiv, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, and the Pentagon press secretary. All ahead on Washington Today. This from CNBC.com. AT&T and Verizon on Tuesday said they would delay deployment of 5G service at towers near some U.S. airports after airlines warned that the rollout would cause flight cancellations. The company statements came just hours after the Biden administration said it was in talks with telecom companies, government agencies, and airlines about the dispute. AT&T and Verizon are scheduled to begin 5G rollout on Wednesday. The 5G C-band service sits next to frequencies used by key instruments. Modern aircraft and the FAA had warned it could interfere with those systems, such as radio altimeters. That from CNBC. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki questioned today about this at her daily briefing with reporters.
Reports that the White House is in talks with the FAA and wireless providers on the 5G rollout and there's potential disruption to airline travel. Is there anything more you can tell us on this agreement you're working on, and are you trying to prevent any flight cancellations which could start as soon as tomorrow?
We are. Those conversations are ongoing. I don't have an update at this moment, but they're ongoing right now, I would say. So we have the safest airspace in the world. We're committed to reaching a solution around 5G deployment that maintains the highest level of safety while minimizing disruptions to passenger travel, cargo operations, and our economic recovery. We certainly understand what's at stake for both industries. We are actively engaged, as you said, with the FAA, FCC, wireless carriers, airlines, and aviation equipment manufacturers to reach a solution. And we believe that with continued cooperation, we can chart a path forward. But certainly minimizing flight disruptions, ensuring safety in travel is a top priority.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. Russell Brandom is a policy editor for The Verge and has been following this issue. He joins us now. We've got wireless carriers, airlines, and government agencies, the FAA and the FCC, all pointing fingers at each other. Help us understand what's going on.
Yeah, so, I think one thing to say is they've been pointing fingers at each other for a very, very long time. And I think now we're getting at really the last sort of plausible time that they can launch this spectrum. So carriers are pretty much fed up, and they said, look, we really have to flip the switch. People are buying 5G phones. A lot of people got them over the holidays. They're expecting this network to really work. T-Mobile has managed to sit this out because they have a different chunk of spectrum. So AT&T and Verizon are really under the gun to say, show us the good 5G network. At the same time, the FAA and airlines have not really done very much in terms of testing and specifically in terms of replacing equipment that they're worried will be negatively affected if AT&T Verizon start using these airwaves.
Now, you note that there's still a dispute over whether it would affect the airlines.
Yeah, so specifically the piece of equipment that they're worried about is a radio altimeter, which, this is maybe you've used an altimeter hiking or something, and this is really the most precise way to tell how far away you are from the ground, right? And it's sort of sending out these radio waves and seeing if it bounces back, right, or how long it takes to bounce back, and really gives you sort of to the foot, this is how far off the ground you are, which is very useful if you're, landing in low visibility conditions, but it also means if you get a mistaken reading and suddenly it's, actually it seems like the ground is really close, or the instruments think the ground is really close, Often there are automated responses to that. The plane can stall because if you're about to run into something, it doesn't want to speed up. And then it can cause these crashes. I mean, this is sort of a documented thing. There was this horrible Turkish Airlines crash basically because of an altimeter mistake. Now, this is not the same spectrum that is going live, but the concern is that it's close enough to it that if there's an altimeter that can sort of be affected by frequencies near the ones it's supposed to be listening into, that it will get triggered and we'll start to have these altimeter problems.
President Biden put out a statement saying his team has been engaging nonstop with the wireless carriers, airlines, aviation equipment manufacturers, and that they'll continue talking until they close the remaining gap and reach a permanent workable solution around the key airports. How close are they to a workable solution?
Well, I mean, they better be close because tomorrow, I mean, the 19th is when they're going to flip a switch and turn this stuff on. Now, Verizon and AT&T have agreed, okay, we're not going to do it next to these airports just yet. But eventually that'll come on. I mean, I think more broadly, the assumption is that once they flip the switch and it starts being on not next to airports, we'll have a better sense of which altimeters are affected by this. I should say, I mean, the other thing that's happening is the FAA has already cleared 45% of planes will certainly not be affected by this. Now, 55% of planes being possibly affected by it is still a lot, but the assumption is that even, over the course of the next few days, they're going to clear more and more planes, and we're going to get more and more aircraft that we're sure are not affected by this.
We're talking with Russell Brandom from The Verge. A final question, and it has to do again with the last minute. People may have woken up today, turned on the news, and saw this story and said, where did this come from? The CEOs from major airlines sending a letter with just a day or two left until. Why did they wait so long to write that letter?
Right. I mean, this is really the $65 billion question. I think for the carriers and for most of the people on the FCC side of this, which is dealing more with sort of phones and antennas and stuff, what they would have liked to have happened is in 2019 when this was first going through rulemaking, and look, we want this spectrum. This is going to be what helps us get data to phones in the most effective way over the next 5 to 10 years. They would have liked the FAA to then say, all right, we're doing a census of all the altimeters, like anyone who's cleared to fly in the United States, send us information about what your altimeter is, and we're going to do this range of tests, and if we think your altimeter might be affected, we're going to replace it. And they would have had 3 years is enough time to do that. Now the last few months has not really been enough time to do that. So they're doing kind of the quick and dirty version of it. I don't have an answer as to why the FAA didn't do this in 2019. I do think the sort of Trump era FAA was focused on other things. They maybe thought that carriers were going to back down and not end up using this spectrum, but it really was a sort of miscommunication and a missed opportunity to not get this ironed out, years ago.
Russell Brandom is the policy editor for The Verge. Find his stories at theverge.com. Follow him on Twitter at Russell Brandom. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
President Joe Biden's infrastructure czar, Mitch Landrieu, the CNN reports, sent letters to all the nation's governors on Tuesday urging them to appoint their own infrastructure implementation coordinators to smooth the rollout of the $1.2 trillion law. Landrieu suggesting the governors could create their own infrastructure task forces modeled on the one created by President Biden in November. Mitch Landrieu was at today's White House press briefing getting a question about how he has worked with Republican governors and how quickly infrastructure projects funded by the new law will be getting underway.
I was wondering if you could tell us what the response from some states in your old neck of the woods has been. We've seen many federal programs, Obamacare, one example, other things. Some red state governors have been resistant. Are you seeing a different kind of response on things like infrastructure, which the programs of which are popular, but the administration isn't necessarily And just give us a time frame of when you think some of these ribbon cuttings, I know that's not the metric, but when will they be happening? Anything this year?
Yeah, Jeff, thank you so much for that. A very wise person said, even if they vote no, they want the dough. And that's absolutely true, especially on infrastructure. As I said, I have personally spoke to over 40 governors, 3 that chiefs of staff. The others, we have been contacted through staff. I've talked to a number of Republican governors, all of whom, in the reddest of red states, were very welcoming. They were very appreciative that the president had asked to call. We clearly acknowledged with each other that we may have differences of opinion on other issues, but on building roads and bridges and airs and airports and clean water and broadband, 75% to 80% of the people of America want these things to happen, and the governors have committed to work with us to actually get it done. You mentioned that in my neck of the woods. I'm from the state of Louisiana, as you know. We have gotten beaten to death by Katrina, Rita, Ike, Gustav, the national recession, the BP oil spill, and a bucket load of other stuff. We always wonder when the locusts are coming. And we have had interaction, as I was lieutenant governor, with a Republican governor who I served with and a Democratic governor. In both of those instances, bipartisanship really is at the forefront of these initiatives. There are going to be some differences, but at the end of the day, there really is common ground, and I feel very good about the willingness to lean forward and to do the things that all of our constituents need, irrespective of what party that they're in. In terms of turning dirt quickly, as I said to you, to level set with everybody in this room, because you will ask me about this from time to time, can you hurry up? When's the money going to get it to the ground? When are the first ribbon cuttings? First of all, this is very different from the American Recovery Program. This is a long-term investment in rebuilding America better. And so there are a lot of these programs that are actually new. Many of them are not. This happens in 2 ways. Some of this is through formula funding that has been set. Every governor has received an indication of what the states are going to receive for the next 5 years, and that's across whoever's sitting in the governor's chair, so they can start planning today and actually start breaking ground as soon as they're ready to do that. The other part of this bill are competitive grants. Some of those are going to take a little bit of time to set up. My expectation is there's some projects that you'll see people turning dirt on in definitely the spring or the fall. Which ones they are, I can't actually point to you right now, but there's no reason why that shouldn't happen, especially if some of the projects have been in the line for some period of time.
To that point, the president promised shovel-ready projects. The administration hasn't yet been able to identify which of those projects might be getting underway soon. When will we get a better sense of what projects are coming?
I can't give you an exact date, but as I said to you, with the announcements that have happened in the first 60 days, and you have a list of what those announcements are, so I don't need to repeat them, but you remember the investments that we made in ports and the investment that we just made in bridges and the ones that we sent out, the ones that Michael Regan sent out on clean water and clean air. The governors now have this money. On top of that, some of this money is fungible from the American Recovery Plan as well. So as soon as the governors and the legislatures decide where this money is going to go, and they do it with appropriate attention to equity, climate, using American products and other things of that nature, those projects shouldn't take long. However, it takes a long time to build a bridge. You don't build a bridge in a day. Now, sometimes people in this town know that you can tear down things a lot quicker than you can build them, and they work hard to do that. In this instance, we're going to take time and do it right, but we're going to do it as quickly as we possibly can.
Mitch Landrieu is a senior White House advisor and infrastructure implementation coordinator, named by President Joe Biden today in the White House briefing room. From the Associated Press, the Biden administration on Tuesday quietly launched its website for Americans to request free at-home COVID-19 tests a day before the site was scheduled to officially go online. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the website was in beta testing and operating at a limited capacity ahead of the official launch.
Can you provide an update on the COVID testing website? Sure. Is it ready to go? Has the hotline number been created? Resiliency against crashes, that type of thing?
Sure. So covidtest.gov is in the beta phase right now, which is a standard part of the process typically as it's being kind of tested in the early stages of being rolled out. We didn't start from scratch here, of course. The Postal Service already runs a website that sells goods to the public, as you know. Every website launch, in our view, comes with risk. We can't guarantee there won't be a bug or two, but the best tech teams across the administration and the Postal Service are working hard to make this a success. So it will officially launch tomorrow morning. It's in the beta testing phase right now. And I would also note that the U.S. Digital Service, which was an organization founded after healthcare.gov, after the healthcare.gov rescue, has been supporting the Postal Service to ensure that they have what they need to be successful in this critical moment. So looking forward to an official launch tomorrow morning, and right now it's in the beta phase.
The White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki in the White House briefing room. President Biden announced a few months ago the U.S. is going to buy 1 billion COVID tests, and people can order 4 at-home tests per residential address. They're free, and the White House says the tests will be shipped by the Postal Service in 7 to 12 days. On Wall Street today, back from the Martin Luther King Day holiday, first day back, the Dow down 543, NASDAQ down 386, S&P down 85. Now to the U.S. Senate floor, where debate formally began on 2 voting rights bills, the Freedom to Vote Act, which sets national standards for elections, and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which deals with states and local jurisdictions with a history of discrimination, requiring that if they change any election laws, it has to be pre-cleared by the federal government. And as NBC News puts it, Senate Democratic leaders are determined to force a showdown over voting rights on the floor, even if it ends in failure for the cause. Republicans are determined to filibuster the bill, and Democrats lack the 50 votes needed to create an exception to the filibuster. Democratic Senators Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona and Joe Manchin of West Virginia firmly opposed to weakening the 60-vote threshold, even though they say they support the 2 bills. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer began with opening remarks.
Now, much has been said over the past few days about the prospects of passing voting rights legislation in this chamber. Senate Democrats are under no illusion that we face difficult odds, especially when virtually every Senate Republican is staunchly against legislation protecting the right to vote. But I want to be clear. When this chamber confronts a question this important, one so vital to our country, so vital to our ideals, so vital to the future of our democracy, you don't slide it off the table and say, never mind. Win, lose, or draw, members of this chamber were elected to debate and to vote, especially on an issue as vital to the beating heart of our democracy as voting rights. And the public is entitled to know where each senator stands on an issue as sacrosanct as defending our democracy. The American people deserve to see their senators go on record on whether they will support these bills or oppose them. Indeed, that may be the only way to make progress on this issue now, for the public to see where each of us in this chamber stands. The public deserves to see it, and that's precisely what the Senate is going to do this week. And make no mistake about it, using Dr. King as an inspiration, Democrats will continue to fight on this issue until we succeed. And I believe history will vindicate us.
The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor as the formal debate began on the voting rights bills, combined now into one bill. The Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, followed, and he opposed both the voting rights bills proposed by the Democrats and this effort to change the filibuster rule to pass it without needing to get 60 votes.
We have strong disagreements about the substance of these bills, but even more broadly, we see decreasing trust in our democracy among both political sides. We have a sitting president of the United States shouting that United States senators are on the side of Bull Connor and Jefferson Davis for refusing to shatter the Senate. Was the Senate created to make these kinds of factional fevers worse, or to help break the fevers? Does the Senate exist to help narrow majorities double down on divisions, or to force broad coalitions to build bridges? This fake hysteria does not prove the Senate is obsolete. It proves the Senate is as necessary as ever. Republicans have supported this limitation on the majority's power, both when we've been in the minority, which these rules protect, and when we've been the majority, which they inconvenience. And last week, some of our colleagues across the aisle reconfirmed they have the courage and the principle to keep their word and to protect the institution as well. But too many of our colleagues across the aisle still want to respond to a 50-50 Senate with a rule-breaking power grab. Voting to break this institution will not be a free vote or a harmless action, even if their effort fails. An unprincipled attempt at grabbing power is not harmless just because it fails. Voting to break the Senate is not cost-free just because a bipartisan majority of your colleagues have the wisdom to stop you.
Senator Mitch McConnell, the minority leader on the Senate floor. The original proposal from the Senate Democratic majority was to carve out an exception to the 60-vote requirement to pass legislation, the filibuster rule, for voting rights legislation, but leaving it intact for other pieces of legislation. But since at least 2 Democratic senators are opposing that, and Democrats don't have the votes to pass it, the Hill newspaper reports that Senate Democrats are eyeing trying to change the Senate's rules to shift to a talking filibuster, which would get rid of the 60-vote hurdle currently required to advance most legislation. The move would let opponents delay a bill for as long as they could hold the floor. But after that, it could pass with a simple majority. One of the opponents to the original idea, Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, spoke with reporters today.
The Democrats are talking about using the nuclear option to create a talking filibuster. Are you open to that idea?
Oh, I love a talking filibuster. I think we should be. I think basically there should be transparency in how we do our business here, or our lack of doing business.
But they're saying at the end of it, it would be a 51.
That has never happened. That's never happened in the history of our country. You know, basically, there's never been a simple majority vote to basically get off of a debate.
Last week, Congressman Clyburn was questioning why you would filibuster your own bill that you worked on by not doing a carve-out for voting rights.
The only thing I've been very clear about that, I just don't know how you break a rule to make a rule and thinking you're doing something that's going to. We've never done this. We have never done. I've been looking for every precedent I can, every carve-out. The bottom line is everything that we've done. They've told me about the debt ceiling. That was done by the rules. That was done by the rules, okay? And that was done with Majority Leader Schumer and Minority Leader McConnell coming to an agreement. That's what it's all about. So we've done everything along the lines of with the rules. And I don't know why we can't come together and find a pathway forward. But breaking the rules, there's no checks and balances in this process. The only thing we have is a filibuster. And think if you have a situation we have right now, where you have the executive branch of government and you have Congress, the House and the Senate, they're all the same. And there's no check and balance because basically you just sweep right through, and the same thing could happen if Republicans had everything. And the only thing I've ever said was this. The majority of my colleagues in the caucus, Democrat caucus, they've changed. They've changed their mind. I respect that. You have a right to change your mind. I haven't. I hope they respect that too. I've never changed my mind on the filibuster.
Senator Joe Manchin, Democrat from West Virginia, with reporters on Capitol Hill. Debate beginning in the Senate on the voting rights bills. Any votes related to the bills and changing the filibuster in some way not expected till at least Wednesday. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy sworn in today to a second term. He's a Democrat. He defeated Republican challenger Jack Ciattarelli by a closer than expected 3 percentage points in the November election. At the ceremony at Patriots Theater in the capital city, Trenton, Governor Murphy pledging to work for bipartisanship ahead.
I am humbled to be the first member of my party to have been given the privilege of a second term in 44 years. Shamelessly fishing for applause there. I am honored to follow in the footsteps of a dear friend and a friend of so many, Governor Brendan Byrne. Amen. But being governor is not about the party to which we belong. So I renew my pledge to be the governor for all of New Jersey, the governor for everyone who voted for me and for everyone who did not. After all, we are all New Jerseyans. And as diverse as we are, we share common challenges, common cause, and a common bond. Together we have been through so much, and together we will seek a brighter tomorrow. Yet just because one year or one term ends and another begins does not mean that the challenges of the previous 4 years cease to exist. If only it were that simple. We know that many challenges remain and that many more will surely come. To start, we continue waging war against a pandemic that has uprooted many of our fellow New Jerseyans' very sense of security. And on top of that, and for far too many across our state and indeed our nation, the fraught state of our politics has brought with it an added fear that the American dream is dying. So our job is to make living, working, and raising a family in New Jersey secure again for every one of the 9.3 million members of our extraordinary extended family.
New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy had his inauguration to the second term today in Trenton. NewJersey.com writes, though Murphy has been adamant he doesn't plan to run for president in 2024, the Democrat's second inaugural address echoed the speech of his Republican predecessor, Governor Chris Christie, delivered at the start of his second term in 2014. Christie argued New Jersey was a model for the nation during an address that proved to be a precursor for his failed 2016 White House bid. Also today, former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio, a Democrat, announcing in a Twitter video that he will not run for governor of New York this year. It ends speculation about whether he would challenge Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul in a primary. Washington Today continues in a minute.
Sunday, February 6th, on In Depth, Georgetown University law professor Cheryl Cashin will be our live guest to talk about race relations and inequality in America. Her many books include The Failures of Integration, The Agitator's Daughter, Place Not Race, and her latest, White Space, Black Hood. Join in the conversation with your phone calls, Facebook comments, texts, and tweets for Cheryl Cashin, live Sunday, February 6th at noon Eastern on Book TV on C-SPAN 2.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. State Department says that the Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke today to the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov to stress, quote, unshakable U.S. commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity and the importance of continuing a diplomatic path to de-escalate tensions surrounding the deeply troubling Russian military buildup in and near Ukraine. Secretary Blinken is traveling to Ukraine to meet with that country's president and foreign minister. A bipartisan group of U.S. senators already in Ukraine for meetings with those officials. Monday night, they held a news conference. You'll hear from the head of the delegation, Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, and Senator Rob Portman, Republican from Ohio.
Thank you for joining us. We are very happy to be here in Kyiv in Ukraine. Senator Portman and I are leading this delegation of bipartisan senators who represent all of the regions of the United States and who are here in strong support of Ukraine's sovereignty. We want to make sure that the Ukrainian people know that we are on their side in the United States Congress in support of the administration's efforts, that we believe the Ukrainian people should determine their futures and their aspirations for what they want their country, your country to be in the future. We also want to send a message to Vladimir Putin that he should understand that we stand with Ukraine as you think about the future, and we will hold him accountable should he threaten the sovereignty of Ukraine.
Thank you. We just had a very productive meeting with President Zelensky. Earlier today, we met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we met with the Minister of the Interior, the Energy Minister, and this evening we're meeting with the Defense Minister. As Senator Shaheen has said, we are here to deliver a clear and unequivocal message of support to the Ukrainian people, but also a message to Russia that we believe in the territorial integrity of Ukraine. We will stand with Ukraine. But also in our meetings today, we asked the question, what more can we do? Working with allied countries all around the world, freedom-loving countries all around the world who support Ukraine. And we got some good information as to how we can help even more to be able to deter the possibility of a senseless, unnecessary Russian buildup on the border and the potential for an invasion of Ukraine. As you may have seen, Republicans and Democrats don't always agree on everything in Washington.
Як ви знаєте, республіканці і демократи в Вашингтоні далеко не завжди погоджуються одне з одним.
But the cause of freedom is something that we share and we support. It knows no political boundaries, and I want you to hear from our colleagues.
Senator Rob Portman, Republican, and before that, Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat. Other senators with them on this trip to Ukraine: Democrats Chris Murphy, Amy Klobuchar, and Richard Blumenthal, and Republicans Kevin Cramer and Roger Wicker. Biden administration has accused Russia of preparing a false flag operation to use as a pretext for military intervention into Ukraine, a charge that Russia denies. Biden administration has also threatened heavy sanctions if Russia invades. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Linda Thomas-Greenfield asked today about possible responses. She was interviewed by Washington Post opinion writer Jonathan Capehart.
Jake Sullivan, President Biden's national security advisor, said the United States was ready for further talks, but also said, quote, "We have been very clear with Russia on the costs and consequences of further military action or destabilization, so we're ready either way." So given that quote and given what you just said, the United States is prepared to do anything and everything, including military action.
We're prepared, as you quote from Jake, to take the necessary actions to respond to Russian aggression, including in New York at the Security Council, where I will be leading efforts to bring this before the Council. If the Russians make the decision to invade Ukraine, this is an attack on the entire UN Charter. It is an attack on peace and security around the globe. And this is something that we will address also in the Council, and the Russians should be prepared for that. We have already had discussions with various colleagues and allies in New York. They are aware of our position, and they know to expect that should Russia make this move, that we will come to the Council, and we will come quickly to the Council.
So, Ambassador, on that point, and when you talk about the Council, you're talking about the Security Council, where Russia has veto power, just in the same way that the United States does and China does. So what exactly can the Security Council do when the potential offender, the person or the entity that gives the reason for the Security Council to meet and to come up with actions, has veto power over what the Security Council can actually do in response?
You know, in 2014, when the Russians invaded Crimea, we brought a resolution before the Council, and we got 13 votes for, 1 abstention, and the Russian veto. Russia was isolated, and they saw and felt the isolation. And that would be the purpose of coming before the Council. Of course, they will veto any resolution that involves them, but they will be totally isolated, and they will be on the defensive.
So then, okay, so the United Nations passes a resolution. Is there anything more the United Nations, and particularly the Security Council, can do if/when the Russians roll over that border?
We can expose what they do when they roll over the border. They use their disinformation campaign, not just in Ukraine and around the globe, but they use their disinformation campaign at the Security Council. And we can expose their actions and publicize their actions in the Security Council.
U.S. Ambassador to the UN Linda Thomas-Greenfield, interviewed by Jonathan Capehart of the Washington Post. Over at the Defense Department, reporters questioning Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby about tensions between the U.S. and Russia over Ukraine.
We've been watching Russian movements now for a few months. Is it any clearer what President Putin's goal is here, and what other options do you have either to deter Russian action or respond to it, if you could detail any of that, and then a follow-up?
I think it would be difficult for us to say with specificity and certainty what we know Mr. Putin is driving at here, what his actual goals are. He clearly is building up a force posture there that provides him multiple options. It's just difficult to know right now what options he's going to choose. And we still don't believe that he's made a final decision. Of course, the option that we would prefer is for him to de-escalate, to take the tensions down. And of course, one of the easiest ways to do that would be to remove some of that force presence. That's not happening. And I'm sorry, you had another. I missed another one.
What other options does the U.S. have either to deter or respond?
So look, I think the president has spoken to this very, very clearly about severe consequences, and that includes in the economic domain. And I obviously won't speak to that with great specificity here from this podium. What we are prepared to do, and what we've said publicly, is if there's another incursion and if our NATO allies request capabilities and support and resources for their reassurance as part of NATO, we will be positively disposed to consider those requests and to see what's possible. And so we're ready to do that. We've thought through various permutations here, and we're ready to do that if asked.
The Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby in the Pentagon briefing room. CNN writes that President Joe Biden has said that sending U.S. combat troops to Ukraine to fight a war with Russia is off the table, but special operations forces already rotate in and out of the country to provide training to Ukrainian forces. And a senior administration official said it's possible that other agencies would provide some support, likely the CIA. Prime Minister of Israel Naftali Bennett interviewed today at the Davos World Economic Forum. He was asked about Iran and the talks over Iran's nuclear program starting up again in Vienna after 5 months on hold while Iran elected a new government. Bennett saying the only acceptable nuclear deal is one in which Iran gives up its nuclear weapons program. Bennett also called on other countries not to invest in Iran.
Iran is an octopus of terror and instability. Their head is in Tehran, and they send their arms all across the Middle East and get involved in Lebanon with Hezbollah, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen with the Houthis. And they sort of have an anti-Midas touch. Every country they get involved with fails. Look at Lebanon now, falling apart. Look at Syria. Look at Yemen. And they have a modus operandi, a very clever one, where they sort of drive out terror, but through their proxies. So they lay back supine in Tehran, sort of remote from the terror that they're conducting, and they send others, their messengers, to conduct terror. We've seen it in Israel with Hezbollah, with Islamic Jihad, with the Iranian militias in Syria. How very comfortable is it for the mullahs in Tehran to cause despair? And I think we see a very similar situation with the Houthis. Who stands behind them? It's Iran. Who funds them? Iran. Who provides them the weaponry? Iran. Who directs them what to do? Iran. So I think the first thing is for the decent countries, the free world, to call Iran on what it's doing. They are the source of terror in the Middle East, and we have to fight back. The last thing you want to do with this sort of octopus is pour tens of billions of dollars into this apparatus. Because what will you get? You'll get terror on steroids, right? Everything we're seeing will be doubled and tripled because they'll be much stronger.
Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett at the World Economic Forum. It's usually held in Davos, Switzerland, but is now virtual for the second year in a row due to the coronavirus pandemic. The forum runs through Friday, and on that last day, one of the speakers is U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. From the Associated Press, the gunman who took 4 people hostage at a Texas synagogue in a 10-hour standoff that ended in his death was checked against law enforcement databases before entering the U.S., but raised no red flags, the White House said Tuesday. British media, including The Guardian, reported Tuesday that Malik Faisal Akram was investigated by the Domestic Intelligence Service, MI5, as a possible terrorist threat in 2020, but the investigation was closed after authorities concluded he posed no threat. That was all from the AP. Here's more on this from the White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki.
How is it that an individual who was known to MI5 in Britain, who was on a watch list as of 2020, ended up in a synagogue in Texas? How did that happen?
Oh, well, our understanding, and obviously we're still looking into this, is that he was checked against U.S. government databases multiple times prior to entering the country, and the U.S. government did not have any derogatory information about the individual in our systems at the time of entry. We're certainly looking back, as I referenced, at what occurred to learn every possible lesson we can to prevent attacks like this in the future. Beyond that, I'd certainly refer you to the Department of Homeland Security.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. And now to the U.S. Supreme Court. CBS Boston puts it this way. U.S. Supreme Court justices seemed to have little doubt Tuesday that Boston was wrong to refuse to fly a banner described as a Christian flag outside City Hall. Arguments at the High Court appeared to unite justices on the left and right in favor of Harold Shurtleff, a conservative activist. Shurtleff wanted to fly a white banner with a red cross on a blue background in the upper left corner called the Christian flag. There are 3 flagpoles outside City Hall that fly the U.S., Massachusetts, and Boston flags. Occasionally, the city takes down its own pennant and temporarily hoists another flag. Although Boston had approved 284 straight applications, most involving the flags of other nations, a city official turned away Shurtleff and his camp constitution because he said he wanted to fly the Christian flag. Well, here's some of the oral argument today before the Supreme Court. Justice Brett Kavanaugh questioning the attorney for Boston, Douglas Harry Hallward Dreemeyer.
It seems to me that maybe the root cause of this, as some of the amicus briefs suggest, is actually a mistaken view about the Establishment Clause, that when you have government property that's opened for a forum for speech or for use, there's a mistaken understanding that has existed that if you allow a bunch of secular groups and then allow a religious group to use it, that you violated the Establishment Clause by doing that. It seems like we've had case after case after case that has tried to correct that misimpression of the Establishment Clause, and that seems to me what the root cause is here. I think the Beckett Fund amicus brief is pretty helpful on that. I'd be curious of your thoughts about that.
Your Honor, I think that the Establishment Clause was cited by the city because the city did not want to be accused of having endorsed a religion. The proposal was to fly the Christian flag, but then the city thought that it was the city's own speech. And if the city, speaking for itself, was to say, we are flying the Christian flag, we, the city, are flying the Christian flag, not one that's had its religious intentions removed through the force of history, but one that is right out there. We are flying it as the Christian flag. That might raise Establishment Clause concerns, I think was legitimate.
But isn't the answer to that what we've said repeatedly, which is equal treatment of religious groups vis-a-vis secular groups, religious speech, religious organizations, there's an open gym policy and a religious group wants to use it and they're excluded because they're religious. We've had cases like that. Isn't the answer to that to say equal treatment of religious groups or religious speech is not an Establishment Clause violation, to reiterate that?
It is absolutely clear that if this is a public forum of any type, limited or general designated, the city does not maintain that it has a basis to exclude religious speech. And it's also clear that the city does not exclude religious groups from proposing to raise a flag. In fact, in connection with Constitution Day, the city said it was willing to raise a flag of Camp Constitution in celebration and recognition of Constitution.
That's Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh with Douglas Hallward Dreemeyer, attorney representing the city of Boston. The case heard today, Shurtleff v. Boston. We covered it on C-SPAN, as we do all the Supreme Court cases. You can find the audio, it's audio only, at our website, cspan.org. Supreme Court today also rejecting a request to block a federal mask mandate for air travel. The emergency application was filed by a father on behalf of himself and his 4-year-old autistic son, both of whom claim to be medically incapable of wearing masks for extended periods. Justice denying this request without comment or noted dissent. Also, NPR reports that the reason Justice Sonia Sotomayor has continued to attend oral arguments remotely is that Justice Neil Gorsuch has refused to wear a mask during in-person proceedings, despite a request from Chief Justice John Roberts that all justices accommodate Justice Sotomayor's concerns about COVID-19. She has diabetes and is at high risk of serious illness from COVID. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. For more top Washington stories, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word at c-span.org/connect. Have a good night.